The story begins on a bright Monday morning in one of the most luxurious office buildings in the city. The lobby sparkled with polished marble floors, shiny glass walls, and the quiet hum of people rushing to start their day. On the top floor, a high-stakes meeting was about to take place, one that could change the future of an entire company. The tension in the air was almost tangible, even before anyone entered the room. This was no ordinary business meeting. It was a negotiation that could involve a billion-dollar deal, and every detail mattered. The room itself reflected the wealth and power of the people who usually occupied it: long wooden tables, sleek leather chairs, a view of the city skyline that made it clear this was a place where decisions were made that could influence millions. The billionaire, a man well known in the business world for his immense fortune and aggressive strategies, was already seated. He exuded confidence, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled together as he surveyed the room with a self-assured smirk. Everyone knew him as someone who didn't just negotiate, he dominated. His reputation preceded him. Across the table sat the CEO, a rising star in the corporate world. She was a black woman who had built her company from the ground up, starting with almost nothing and growing it into a respected enterprise. Her presence commanded respect, and yet, in this room, she was facing one of the most intimidating figures in business. Despite the billionaire's reputation, she was not afraid. She understood the importance of this meeting and knew that confidence, preparation, and composure were her strongest allies. She had spent weeks analyzing every aspect of the deal, preparing questions, counteroffers, and strategies. But beyond the numbers and contracts, this meeting was about more than money. It was a test of character, power, and respect. Both individuals understood that a single misstep could cost millions, or even billions, and could change the course of their careers forever. The assistants and staff hustled quietly around the room, placing neatly arranged documents, laptops, and refreshments on the table. There was an unspoken understanding that the meeting was about to begin. Every glance, every subtle movement, carried meaning. The billionaire's assistant whispered last-minute instructions, reminding him of his talking points, while the CEO's team silently nodded, signaling their readiness. The room was a mix of anticipation and underlying tension, as everyone sensed that this was not just a meeting about numbers, it was a battle of wits and influence. As the meeting began, the billionaire opened with his usual charm, projecting warmth and professionalism. He laughed, shook hands, and made casual remarks to set the tone. But beneath the surface, there was an unmistakable edge of arrogance. He was used to being in control, used to being the one whose opinions and decisions carried weight beyond measure. In his mind, the CEO was just another negotiator, someone who could be pressured, intimidated, or manipulated if needed. The CEO, however, had her own plan. She greeted him politely but firmly, projecting a calm confidence that immediately set her apart. She knew that the room's power dynamics could shift in an instant, depending on how she presented herself. With every word she spoke, she conveyed intelligence, clarity, and authority. She wasn't just there to negotiate a deal, she was there to prove that her accomplishments and value were undeniable, regardless of anyone's attempt to diminish her. As the discussion began to touch on the specifics of the billion-dollar deal, the tension in the room subtly increased. The stakes were clear, every word, every gesture, and every pause had weight. The billionaire, expecting compliance or perhaps nervousness from the CEO, was in for a surprise. She was not reacting as he had anticipated. Her composure and clarity began to challenge the subtle power he tried to project. Even in this early stage of the meeting, it was evident that this was not going to be a typical negotiation. The energy in the room was electric. Observers could almost feel the clash of personalities, the collision of ambition and ego. Outside, the city went about its normal rhythm, unaware that within this glass tower, a moment of history was quietly unfolding. This meeting, with its high stakes and powerful participants, was not only about money, it was about respect, integrity, and who could stand their ground under pressure. Even as they exchanged opening remarks and reviewed the documents on the table, there was a sense of anticipation that something significant was about to happen. Both the billionaire and the CEO were acutely aware that this meeting could be remembered for years to come, not just for the financial implications, but for the story it would tell about courage, strategy, and human behavior under extreme pressure. Every smile, every laugh, and every look carried unspoken messages that could tip the scales. In these first moments of the meeting, the audience, everyone in the room, realized that this was not just another corporate negotiation. It was the beginning of a dramatic story of power, respect, and resilience. The high-stakes environment set the tone for what would soon become a memorable clash, one that proved that money alone does not determine victory, and that true leadership is measured not just by wealth, but by courage and integrity. The meeting, which had started with polite introductions and strategic smiles, quickly took a dramatic turn. The billionaire, confident in his wealth and status, decided it was time to assert dominance in a way that he believed would intimidate the CEO. He leaned back in his chair, a sly grin spreading across his face, and made a move that would forever be remembered. With an almost theatrical flair, he grabbed a plate of food that had been served for the meeting, a simple assortment of sandwiches and fruit, and, in an attempt to humiliate her, dumped it across her documents and lap. The room froze. The assistants gasped, papers rustled to the floor, and even the city skyline visible through the windows seemed to pause in that moment. For a split second, the billionaire felt victorious. He laughed loudly, his voice echoing off the polished walls, expecting the CEO to react with shock, anger, or even submission. This was his style, power through fear, dominance through humiliation. He had used similar tactics countless times before and had always emerged as the undisputed authority in any room he entered. But this time, he had miscalculated. The CEO remained calm. She did not scream, she did not retreat, and she certainly did not let his act of arrogance shake her. Instead, she calmly pushed the papers aside, brushed the food from her lap, and looked directly at him with steady eyes. There was no panic, no embarrassment, only composed authority. Her silence, her refusal to react in the way he expected, created a tension that hung in the room like a heavy cloud. Suddenly, the billionaire realized that his usual tricks were failing. His laughter, which had begun with such confidence, now sounded hollow and forced. The room's energy had shifted. What had been a display of arrogance now revealed vulnerability. Observers in the room, board members, assistants, and advisors, watched in stunned silence. Some tried not to show their surprise, while others exchanged quick, knowing glances. Everyone could see the unspoken truth: the billionaire had underestimated the CEO. She was not a typical negotiator who could be cowed by theatrics or intimidation. She had come prepared, not just with numbers and strategies, but with an unwavering sense of self-respect and courage. It was in these moments that the dynamics of the meeting truly began to shift. The billionaire, who had always relied on his wealth and reputation to dominate discussions, now faced a challenge he could not simply buy or control. His smirk began to falter, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The CEO, in contrast, exuded quiet confidence, her posture strong, her words measured, her eyes unflinching. She knew the power of presence, the strength in remaining calm under pressure, and the advantage of letting someone else reveal their insecurity first. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that this act of arrogance had backfired spectacularly. The CEO's calm response was more powerful than any contract or negotiation tactic. By refusing to react, she subtly shifted the balance of power. The billionaire, despite his billions, began to realize that money alone could not guarantee control. Respect, intellect, and composure, qualities he had underestimated, were far more formidable. What could have been a moment of humiliation for her instead became a silent display of her strength. Each passing second reminded everyone in the room that authority is not always measured by wealth or status. Sometimes, it is measured by courage, dignity, and the refusal to be diminished by someone else's ego. The CEO had turned an act meant to degrade her into a quiet but undeniable statement: she was not to be underestimated, and no one, no matter how rich or powerful, could force her to submit. The tension lingered in the room for the rest of the meeting. While the billionaire tried to regain his composure, cracking jokes and returning to his talking points, the energy had already shifted. The room, once dominated by his presence, now subtly gravitated toward her. Every word she spoke carried weight, every pause was intentional. The board members began to realize that this was no ordinary negotiation, it was a test of character, a clash of values, and a lesson in true leadership. By the end of the session, even before any official decisions were made, the message was clear: arrogance might command attention, but it does not command respect. The billionaire had tried to intimidate, but the CEO had responded with quiet strength, turning the meeting into a masterclass in resilience and strategy. What had started as an attempt to assert dominance had, in fact, highlighted the CEO's intelligence, composure, and unwavering authority. This dramatic early exchange set the tone for the rest of the negotiation. Everyone in the room, including the billionaire himself, now knew that the real battle was not about numbers on a page, it was about ego, strategy, and who could maintain control under pressure. And in that first powerful moment, it became evident that this meeting would not be remembered for the billionaire's wealth or influence, but for the courage, poise, and brilliance of the CEO who refused to be humiliated. In the moments immediately after the billionaire dumped food across the CEO's documents, the room seemed to freeze. The laughter, once loud and confident, now hung awkwardly in the air, fading into uncomfortable silence. For everyone in the room, it was a shocking moment. The billionaire expected an explosive reaction, anger, embarrassment, perhaps even tears. What he didn't expect was the absolute calmness that followed. The CEO, sitting tall and composed, didn't flinch. She didn't scream, she didn't slam her hand on the table, and she certainly didn't beg for respect. Instead, she looked at him with steady, unflinching eyes, the kind of gaze that could silently speak volumes without uttering a single word. She took a deep breath, quietly brushing crumbs from her lap and stacking the scattered documents neatly. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and graceful. There was a quiet power in her demeanor, a message that no act of arrogance, no matter how dramatic, could destabilize her. She exuded confidence not just through her posture, but through her calm energy, which seemed to ripple through the room. The assistants, staff, and even other board members couldn't help but notice the stark contrast, the billionaire's brash arrogance versus her poised, quiet authority. The CEO then leaned forward slightly, opening the first document with calm precision. She began speaking in a measured tone, her voice soft but firm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Every word was intentional. She reframed the conversation back to the deal, reminding everyone that business, not theatrics, was the reason they were there. Her approach was subtle but devastatingly effective. Instead of reacting with emotion, she reclaimed the room through intellect and composure. The billionaire, initially confident that he had disrupted her, now felt a creeping unease. For the first time, he realized that his attempts to intimidate might have failed. What made her response even more powerful was the deliberate use of silence. In negotiation, silence is often more potent than words, and she understood this instinctively. After each comment from the billionaire, she paused, letting the weight of her silence sink in. The room held its breath. Board members shifted in their seats, recognizing that the power dynamic had begun to shift. The CEO's calm was not weakness, it was strength. She was demonstrating that control and authority do not require loud words or displays of aggression. Sometimes, the quietest presence commands the most attention. Even as the billionaire tried to regain his footing, making jokes and leaning back in his chair with forced laughter, it was clear that the energy in the room had changed. The CEO now held it. She had turned what was meant to be a humiliating act into a moment that showcased her resilience, intelligence, and strategic thinking. Every observer could see that she had not only survived an attempt at intimidation but had done so with remarkable dignity. It was a lesson in leadership. True power is not demonstrated through wealth or ego, but through composure, confidence, and self-respect. As the discussion moved toward numbers, projections, and terms of the deal, the CEO maintained her focus. She addressed points with clarity and authority, answering questions with precise, well-prepared responses. Her calm presence acted as a subtle counterbalance to the billionaire's erratic energy, highlighting his overconfidence and exposing the cracks in his assumed dominance. Every calculated word she spoke reinforced her control over the situation. The billionaire, who had entered the room expecting to dictate terms, now found himself having to adjust his approach. It was also a lesson in strategy. The CEO understood that allowing anger or frustration to take over would have played into the billionaire's hands. By staying calm, she demonstrated emotional intelligence, signaling to everyone present that she could navigate high-pressure situations without losing her composure. Her actions silently conveyed a critical message: respect is earned, not demanded, and intimidation tactics are powerless against someone who stands firmly in their own authority. As the meeting continued, the CEO's calm response began to influence the room. Other board members, initially hesitant and unsure, started to align themselves subtly with her approach. Her measured, composed demeanor had created an invisible anchor in the room. The billionaire's aggressive energy, meant to dominate and control, now felt out of place and almost desperate in contrast. In effect, she had shifted the invisible power dynamics with nothing more than presence, confidence, and intellect. By the end of this phase of the meeting, one thing was undeniable: the CEO had taken control, not through aggression or loud displays, but through quiet, unwavering strength. She had turned an attempted humiliation into a demonstration of resilience, strategy, and authority. The billionaire, once confident he controlled the room, was left to reckon with the realization that money and status could not buy respect. In that moment, the foundation was laid for the next dramatic twist in this high-stakes negotiation, proving that true leadership is measured not by wealth, but by courage, intelligence, and the ability to remain composed when faced with arrogance and disrespect. The moment the billionaire's laughter began to falter, the room seemed to collectively exhale. What had started as a shocking display of arrogance had shifted into something entirely unexpected. Every person in the boardroom, from the senior executives to the assistants standing quietly in the corners, felt the tension in the air like a living thing. Eyes darted back and forth, trying to read the expressions of both the billionaire and the CEO. It was a rare moment where everyone in the room realized they were witnessing more than a business negotiation. They were witnessing a power struggle, an unspoken battle of authority, ego, and respect. The observers were stunned, unable to conceal their astonishment. Some had seen difficult meetings before, aggressive personalities, and high-pressure negotiations, but nothing like this. The billionaire, a man who had built his empire by being feared and respected, had just attempted a dramatic act of humiliation, and for the first time in many years, it seemed to backfire. His confidence, normally unshakable, now appeared brittle, almost fragile. The CEO, on the other hand, remained composed, a calm force in the middle of chaos. Every observer could see that her poise and unwavering confidence were beginning to shift the energy in the room. There were subtle reactions everywhere. A junior executive glanced nervously at the billionaire, wondering how he would respond next. An assistant, who had been hovering near the door, exchanged a quick, incredulous look with a colleague. Even the seasoned board members, individuals who had negotiated hundreds of millions of dollars in deals, seemed momentarily caught off guard. The CEO's calm defiance was magnetic. It demanded attention and respect without needing to raise her voice or act aggressively. Every observer, whether they wanted to or not, was being drawn into the drama of the moment. Some observers felt a sense of disbelief. How could someone remain so composed when faced with such an obvious act of disrespect? Others began to admire her silently. In real time, they were seeing a masterclass in leadership, emotional intelligence, and strategy. It was one thing to be confident when everything went smoothly. It was another entirely to maintain control when faced with humiliation, arrogance, and a billionaire's attempt to dominate. Each person in the room was now quietly measuring their own reactions against hers, recognizing the sheer strength it took to remain calm while the world seemed to be conspiring to unbalance her. The billionaire himself noticed the shift. His attempts at charm, his forced smiles, even the remnants of his laughter now seemed ineffective. For the first time, he was not in control. Observers noticed subtle signs, a slight tightening of his jaw, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a rare moment where his dominance seemed challenged. The room, once entirely under his invisible command, was now questioning him, if only silently. It was a humbling sight for anyone who had long relied on power, wealth, and fear to achieve their objectives. The contrast between the billionaire and the CEO was striking. Observers could see the sharp differences, arrogance versus composure, force versus strategy, impulsiveness versus calculated calm. Every gesture mattered, the way she adjusted her documents, the way she answered questions, the way she paused after his statements. Even the subtlest actions sent ripples through the room, and observers were acutely aware that history was unfolding before them. Some couldn't help but admire her courage and intelligence, while others quietly feared the implications of what this display of strength might mean for the rest of the negotiation. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere in the room became electric. The observers, who had initially been focused solely on the numbers, contracts, and business implications, were now captivated by the human drama unfolding before them. Whispers of astonishment passed between colleagues, but no one dared break the tension with overt commentary. Everyone recognized that this was not a moment for distractions, it was a moment to witness how leadership, integrity, and strategy could triumph in the face of arrogance. Even after the immediate shock faded, the observers remained alert. They understood that the billionaire's fading confidence and the CEO's unwavering calm would shape the rest of the meeting. Everyone in the room, whether publicly or privately, began recalculating expectations. The CEO had subtly, without raising her voice or showing anger, shifted the balance of power. And the observers, whether they realized it or not, were silently taking notes, understanding that this was a rare lesson in courage, authority, and respect. By the end of this phase, one thing was clear to all who had witnessed it: this was no longer just a business negotiation. It was a story of power dynamics, resilience, and the unspoken rules of leadership in action. The observers, now fully engaged in the drama, were ready to see what would happen next. The billionaire had underestimated her, and the consequences of that miscalculation were only just beginning to unfold. By the time the immediate shock around the pool had begun to settle, the mansion had already started buzzing in a new way, this time, not just with whispers and nervous glances, but with the invisible hum of social media. Someone had captured the entire incident on their phone: the shove, the splash, the stunned reactions of the guests, and, most importantly, the calm but piercing expression of the billionaire's wife as she emerged from the pool. The clip, meant perhaps as a private record of a shocking party moment, now had the potential to reach far beyond the walls of the mansion. Within minutes, the video was shared among friends at the party, first as a message with a shocked emoji, then as a story on Instagram. The friends who had pushed her tried to delete it, but it had already been forwarded, screenshotted, and discussed. The moment that had seemed confined to a poolside circle of luxury and gossip was now on a path to become a global spectacle. Phones buzzed incessantly as more guests captured reactions, comments, and the ripples in the water, each clip adding to the growing archive of evidence. Outside the mansion, social media users began noticing the clip almost immediately. It was short, dramatic, and perfectly shareable, the kind of content that people click on, comment about, and pass along in seconds. The title of the video alone started circulating: "White guests shoved black woman into pool, then realized she was a billionaire's wife." The shocking twist made it irresistible. People couldn't believe it, a playful stunt gone horribly wrong, set against the backdrop of wealth, privilege, and social hierarchy. Within hours, the clip had gone viral, racking up thousands of views, shares, and comments. The public reaction was instantaneous and intense. On Twitter, hashtags began trending, fueled by outrage, fascination, and speculation. Hashtag billionaire's wife incident and hashtag pool party fail quickly gained traction. Users dissected every detail of the video, the expressions, the reactions, the body language of everyone involved. Memes were created, some mocking the friend's recklessness, others marveling at the billionaire's calm demeanor. News outlets even began picking up the story, amplifying it further. The incident had escaped the mansion and entered a global stage where millions could watch, comment, and form opinions. Inside the mansion, guests began to notice the viral attention. Phones were no longer just recording, they were live streaming, updating, and alerting friends across the globe. Even those who had been trying to downplay the incident realized it was no longer under their control. The friends who had caused the splash felt the weight of public scrutiny pressing down on them. Their faces, their reactions, and even their attempts to apologize were now being dissected online. Panic replaced embarrassment as they realized that the incident could have real-life consequences, social, professional, and even legal. The billionaire's wife, aware of the attention but unaffected, continued to maintain her composure. Her calm, confident presence only made the video more compelling to viewers online. People were fascinated by her poise, how she had turned what could have been humiliation into an image of strength and dignity. Comments poured in, praising her restraint, her grace, and the quiet authority she displayed in a moment when chaos surrounded her. As the night progressed, the mansion itself became a hub of viral activity. Guests checked their phones constantly, refreshing feeds, and seeing their private party moments projected onto screens worldwide. Conversations shifted from luxury and gossip to the unpredictable power of social media. Even those who had initially dismissed the incident as a minor accident could now see how quickly something meant to be private had become a public spectacle, affecting perceptions far beyond the event itself. The viral explosion didn't just end with entertainment, it sparked debates about privilege, accountability, and the consequences of careless actions. Online commentators dissected the social dynamics, discussing why the friend's behavior was reckless and what it revealed about elitism and ignorance. Some praised the billionaire's wife for her calm handling, while others criticized the friends for their thoughtlessness. The story had become more than a party mishap, it was now a viral phenomenon, a cautionary tale about the intersection of social power, wealth, and the relentless reach of digital media. By the end of the night, it was clear that the incident would not fade quietly. The poolside prank had transformed into a worldwide story, shared, commented on, and debated across continents. What began as a simple act of thoughtless fun had evolved into a cultural moment, one that illustrated the speed, unpredictability, and sheer influence of social media in the modern world. The mansion, once a private world of laughter and luxury, had unknowingly hosted a viral sensation that would be remembered for years. After the tense pause and strategic evaluation, the CEO leaned forward, her posture calm yet commanding. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, every mind waiting for her next words. She had already made her decision internally, weighing the billions on the table against her principles, her self-respect, and the reputation of her company. It was a decision that required immense courage, because few people would ever dare to cancel a deal worth $1 billion, especially when facing a powerful billionaire known for his influence, ego, and aggression. Yet, in her mind, there was no hesitation. Respect and integrity were worth far more than money. With deliberate clarity, she addressed the room. Her voice was steady, measured, and unwavering. She explained that she could no longer proceed under circumstances where her dignity had been disrespected. She calmly, almost gracefully, announced the cancellation of the $1 billion deal. Every word she spoke carried weight, echoing across the polished boardroom like a proclamation of authority. The assistants and executives in the room felt a mixture of awe and disbelief, realizing they were witnessing a rare act of business courage, a move that could either be praised as visionary or risk enormous fallout. The billionaire's reaction was immediate and telling. The confident smirk that had dominated his face since the start of the meeting faltered. The arrogance that had fueled his actions evaporated, replaced by a subtle flicker of shock and disbelief. For the first time, he realized that his wealth and power could not buy control in this situation. His smile, once broad and triumphant, faded completely. The observers could see the shift in his demeanor, the small tightening of his jaw, the way he leaned back in his chair, searching for words, only to find none that could reclaim the advantage he had lost. Around the room, a silent energy rippled. Some executives nodded slightly, recognizing the courage it took to make such a decision. Some assistants whispered quietly among themselves, unable to hide their astonishment. The CEO's calm, authoritative stance had turned an attempted humiliation into a moment of empowerment. By refusing to continue with the deal under disrespectful conditions, she had demonstrated a principle far more powerful than money: self-respect is non-negotiable. The billionaire attempted to speak, to regain control, but the weight of the CEO's decision hung over him like a shadow. Every word he tried to utter seemed inadequate, forced, or defensive. Observers noted how even his body language betrayed his frustration: an unusual flurry of gestures, an awkward shift in posture, a faltering attempt to laugh it off. The room, once dominated by his presence and confidence, now subtly recognized that the real authority rested with the CEO. She had turned the tables completely, and the power dynamic had been irreversibly altered. As the reality of the cancellation settled in, the room began to understand the broader implications. The CEO had not only walked away from a deal worth $1 billion, but she had also sent a powerful message to the business world: integrity, courage, and self-respect outweigh financial gain. Observers felt a mixture of inspiration and astonishment. Some mentally noted that this was a historic moment in corporate leadership, an example to be studied, shared, and remembered. The billionaire, despite his resources and experience, was left to process the consequences. For him, it was a humbling moment, a reminder that arrogance and theatrics cannot guarantee control over every situation. His fading smile reflected not only surprise but also the rare recognition that he had misjudged his counterpart. Meanwhile, the CEO remained composed, radiating quiet strength, her focus unwavering. In that instant it was clear who had truly led the room, commanded respect, and demonstrated the qualities of a remarkable leader. By canceling the deal, the CEO had effectively rewritten the rules of engagement. Observers realized that this decision would not only impact the immediate negotiation but also send a broader message to the corporate world about leadership, courage, and the importance of standing firm in the face of disrespect. She had transformed what could have been a humiliating, shameful incident into a story of empowerment, resilience, and unshakable authority. In the minutes that followed, as people collected their thoughts and documents, the room remained tense but respectful. There was a sense of reverence in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that they had just witnessed a masterclass in strategy, poise, and ethical leadership. The cancellation of the $1 billion deal was not just a business decision, it was a historic statement about the values that define true power and leadership. The moment the billionaire's smile faded and the CEO officially canceled the $1 billion deal, the news did not stay contained within the polished walls of the boardroom. Word spread like wildfire, first through hushed conversations among assistants and board members, then through emails and phone calls to stakeholders, and soon it exploded across media channels. In the corporate world, where billion-dollar deals are often shrouded in secrecy, this incident became an instant sensation. The story of the billionaire attempting to humiliate a rising black CEO, and her unwavering, composed response, captured the imagination of people everywhere. Within hours, journalists were calling, eager to get comments from everyone involved. Analysts on financial news networks dissected every detail of the meeting, from the billionaire's arrogance to the CEO's strategic brilliance. Social media erupted with clips, images, and commentary, as viewers around the world shared their shock, admiration, and opinions. The hashtags #BlackCEO, #BillionaireFails, and #BusinessCourage began trending, making the story impossible to ignore. Observers everywhere marveled at the CEO's composure and decision-making, recognizing that she had turned a moment of attempted humiliation into an extraordinary display of leadership. The CEO herself became a symbol almost overnight. Articles praised her courage, calling her a role model for young entrepreneurs, especially women and people of color. Business schools started referencing the incident as a case study in leadership, negotiation, and integrity. Commentators highlighted her emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and ability to maintain control under extreme pressure. Meanwhile, the billionaire faced a wave of criticism. Pundits and social media users alike questioned his behavior, pointing out that his wealth and power could not shield him from public scrutiny when he crossed the line of respect. Even within corporate circles, the story had a ripple effect. Executives and employees began discussing the importance of dignity and respect in business negotiations. Many admitted that they had rarely seen someone confront arrogance so decisively without losing composure. The incident sparked conversations about power dynamics, corporate ethics, and the role of personal integrity in high-stakes business dealings. Observers marveled at how one bold decision had not only affected a $1 billion deal but had also influenced the perception of leadership in the business world. The media coverage went beyond business. Major news outlets framed the story as a lesson in courage, dignity, and the refusal to be intimidated. The CEO was celebrated in interviews, podcasts, and panel discussions. Her decision resonated with people from all walks of life, inspiring aspiring entrepreneurs, students, and professionals around the globe. The narrative became about more than money. It was about strength, principles, and standing up against injustice, even when faced with someone far more powerful. Meanwhile, the billionaire attempted to manage the fallout. Press releases were issued, advisors attempted damage control, and public appearances were strategically planned, but the narrative had already shifted. The world was no longer focused on his wealth or influence, it was focused on the CEO, her courage, and the story of how respect and strategy had triumphed over arrogance. Analysts noted that the cancellation could have long-term consequences for his reputation, while the CEO's reputation soared to new heights. In corporate networks, her story became a benchmark. Leaders began referencing it when discussing negotiation strategy, workplace respect, and ethical leadership. Her calm and decisive handling of the situation was studied and admired, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the original boardroom. In essence, the aftermath and media buzz elevated the incident from a single negotiation into a global lesson about courage, composure, and the power of standing firm in one's principles. By the end of the week, the story had traveled across continents, inspiring countless individuals while reshaping conversations about leadership and integrity in the corporate world. Observers and media alike agreed, this was a defining moment, a story of triumph over arrogance, and a reminder that true leadership is not measured by wealth or intimidation, but by courage, strategy, and unshakable self-respect. In the weeks and months following the cancelled $1 billion deal, the story of the CEO and the billionaire became more than just a news headline, it evolved into a lesson in leadership, courage, and integrity that resonated across industries and around the world. People reflected not only on the dramatic incident in the boardroom, but on the deeper meaning of her actions. What made this story remarkable was not the money at stake or the billionaire's arrogance, but the CEO's ability to turn a moment of attempted humiliation into an enduring example of principled leadership. Her decision to walk away from the deal, despite the immense financial pressure, sent a powerful message: integrity cannot be compromised for wealth. Observers and analysts noted that in a world driven by money, this act of courage stood out as a beacon for ethical business practices. Leaders began citing her story in seminars, workshops, and corporate training sessions, using it as a model of how calm, strategic thinking, and self-respect can outmatch intimidation and ego. The lesson was clear: success is not defined solely by financial gain, it is defined by the choices you make when confronted with challenges that test your values. The CEO's legacy extended far beyond the boardroom. Entrepreneurs, especially women and people of color, looked to her as a source of inspiration. Her story proved that no matter how high the stakes, standing firm in one's principles earns respect far more enduring than money or influence ever could. Social media continued to celebrate her poise, determination, and intelligence, with millions of people sharing her story, quoting her calm yet powerful words, and praising her unwavering stance. She became a symbol of resilience, showing that courage is most evident in the face of adversity and disrespect. In corporate circles, the incident also prompted reflection on power dynamics and workplace culture. Executives began to reassess how they handle negotiations, interactions, and conflicts. The story underscored that arrogance and wealth cannot replace professionalism, respect, and integrity. It reminded companies and leaders that true authority is earned through behavior, ethics, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The CEO had set a new standard, demonstrating that leadership is not just about strategy or financial acumen, it is about character, composure, and vision. For the billionaire, the aftermath was equally instructive, though in a very different way. Observers noted the public scrutiny he faced and how quickly his arrogance was exposed. The fading of his confidence in the boardroom and the widespread attention to his behavior became a cautionary tale in itself. Wealth and status are powerful, but they are never a substitute for respect, humility, or ethical conduct. His story served as a counterpoint to the CEO's, illustrating the consequences of overestimating one's influence and underestimating the strength of others. Ultimately, the CEO's decision to cancel the $1 billion deal became an enduring story of empowerment and leadership. It was cited in countless discussions about ethics, negotiation, and resilience. Her calm, strategic, and principled approach became a benchmark for others, a real-life example of how to navigate high-stakes challenges while maintaining dignity and authority. Her legacy is not just the deal she canceled, but the message she sent to the world. Courage, integrity, and self-respect are more valuable than any contract, any sum of money, or any display of power. The story has been retold in articles, podcasts, business seminars, and online discussions as a timeless lesson. Young leaders and aspiring entrepreneurs study it to understand that leadership is measured not by how much you can take from others, but by how firmly you can stand for what is right, even when it comes at a tremendous cost. In the end, the CEO didn't just walk away from a deal, she walked into history. She transformed a moment that could have been humiliating into a testament to her strength, strategy, and vision. The lesson was simple yet profound: respect, courage, and integrity always leave a mark far deeper than wealth ever can. The story of that high-stakes boardroom confrontation continues to inspire countless individuals, proving that true leadership is timeless, principled, and unstoppable.